Welcome to Elasmocast. Today's a cool episode. This is the first Elasmocast episode with more than two people on it, and that's because we're going to be doing a really, I maybe not exhaustive, but as exhaustive as possible review of Paleozoic fish of Arizona. Non-tetrapod fish, of course. But yeah, I'm really excited for this. Today, we're joined by Dr. Grant Boardman and Tom Olson. How are you guys doing today?
Good,
How you
good.
doing? I'm doing good.
Awesome. Yeah, so before we get started, do you guys want to introduce yourselves? Just talk a little bit about your backgrounds?
Sure. Like Ben said, I'm Dr. Grant Boardman. So this is a slide that I often put in talks for people, especially for groups that I've not talked to before, just so they can kind of get an idea about where I've been and what I'm currently doing. I did my undergrad in geology at LSU. And that's really where I got into first working with vertebrate and invertebrate fossils. I worked with Dr. Judith Chabot, and we primarily worked on like late Cretaceous and Miocene stuff. I also did a lot of work in the invertebrate paleontology lab, so I'm really familiar with, say, like forams and diatoms, and
Ooh.
fairly familiar with brachiopods and things like that because I've collected tons of brachiopods over the years. I did my master's in biology at East Tennessee State University in Johnson City, where I was pretty much the first person to graduate with a degree in paleontology. They had just made a paleontology program there, and I got to work at the Gray Fossil Site. If I don't know if your viewers are necessarily going to be familiar with Gray Fossil Site, but it's a sinkhole site, Myopliocene in age, tons of rhinos and tapirs and things like that, alligators, things that you might not expect for, say, like the Miocene Pliocene of Tennessee. And then I did my PhD at the University of Nebraska, where I was mostly out in the White River, working on the White River fauna, mostly the mammals and things like that. I did a lot of isotopic work, and I've been a teacher for forever and ever and ever. It's just sort of the thing I kind of rolled into doing. But I'm also a research associate at the Arizona Museum of Natural History. So that's kind of where I am now. And Ben might be familiar with the fact that I just got into really working with Devonian fish like in the last year. Because I was in the annex at the museum, I saw a bunch of boxes against the wall. And as it turned out, those boxes were the remainder of Heidi Marie Johnson's Payson locality. All those things that she had finished prepping out, but hadn't made it into a museum collection anywhere and didn't have a number and hadn't been really looked at. So I kind of got into working on Devonian fishes, specifically the placoderms that we're going to talk about later, that way, because I just happened to be looking for another project to work on.
Awesome. And Tom, what's your background?
Wow. I've been a paleo enthusiast since age 7. Growing up near Petrified Forest National Park, that made a rockhound out of you real fast. And so basically I went to, Northline Pioneer College first as a junior college and get all my necessary things to transfer up to Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff. And had the privilege of meeting Dave Elliott, which is one of the world's experts in the oldest fish and Paleozoic fishes, and having the opportunity of being under his guidance and all that. Been privileged enough to do a lot of research projects with Dr. Elliott, and then expanded from there back to Petrified Forest after college. Well, back and forth actually between internships and developed the skills there. And then eventually got my degree there at NAU. And then I kind of had to go into the job market and, I had to do teaching right offhand. So basically, I've been teaching 7th to ninth grade science off and on, and then as a research assistant with New Mexico Museum of Natural History, Arizona Natural History Museum, and Northern Arizona University, and the Petrified Forest, of course, and just expanded there. My goal was to get a good assemblage and a good collection of fossils all throughout the Paleozoic up to the Triassic, and that was my goal. And so, with the guidance of course, Dr. Elliott, and with the guidance of Dr. Vincent Santucci, um, Dr. Spencer Lucas, Martin Lockley, and Dr. Dale Nations, I've been able to get a good comprehensive collection of Paleozoic strata.
That's awesome. And that's another thing that, as a quick aside to bring up to people that want to get into paleontology and they say, I want to be a paleontologist, that usually means becoming a teacher or something along those lines.
Of
And
course.
then you get to do research on the side. Or if you're lucky enough to get one of those few professor gigs, then you can do research, but there's still some teaching element in there. That is, I think, one of the most common career paths for paleontologists. Either that or maybe you're a dedicated geologist and then you do your research on the side and things like that too.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So, having the privilege of working under, different professors and all that, I've gotten an overall view of what's going on in the Paleozoic, in different environments, transgression, regression of the seas, the beginning split up of the continent Pangea, of course, and finding out basically the the makeup of sediments and sedimentary rock, and what would be the origin of that petrology, basically.
Yeah, I'm really excited to get into that. But before we do, we should clarify for our listeners that may not know what exactly the Paleozoic is and what periods comprise of it.
Okay. So I've got a nice, I guess like a nice infographic that'll work for that. And then Tom and I think, can just kind of piggyback off of the picture.
Yeah, so you got Morella in there as the
Sort of a representative of the
a
Cambrian.
representative of the arthropods in the Cambrian.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I like that. And then the Silurian, you got your crinoids and your blastoids. Then your Ordovician, of course, you're going to get your um, Orthoceras and cephalopods. Then the Devonian definitely was the age of fishes, and it was so diverse.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
we'll be talking about the Devonian onward particularly in this, based on just Arizona's record.
Yeah, so it gives, the image gives you a good idea about the start and ending dates of the various periods of the Paleozoic. And when I talk about the Devonian later, I'm mostly going to be talking about sort of the upper part of the Devonian, so the younger part. So like 380 to 359 million years ago. We won't be talking about the lower part of the Devonian primarily because I'm not aware of any
Well,
lower Devonian material. So
yeah,
it's
but the strata is so obscure anyway.
yeah,
It
yeah,
it probably thinned out by the time you got down to central Arizona anyway,
yeah,
because of what they found in Utah and the Water Canyon Formation and all that. So we're thinking that it thinned out
yeah.
and it just wasn't deposited.
Hmm. But yeah, what's really cool about Arizona is we have a very extensive record of the Paleozoic era. And the Paleozoic era, think anything like before the dinosaurs, but would be after the Proterozoic. So you're talking about, like you can see here, the Cambrian through the Permian. There's no dinosaurs or anything like that. You had these on land, some weird, what are now called proto-mammals, what used to be called Mammal-like reptiles, those were appearing in the Carboniferous and they were around in the Permian. But the Paleozoic is really interesting. And in Arizona, I think one of the key places that you're looking at with the Paleozoic would be the Grand Canyon, where you have a massive sequence of stratigraphy that spans most of the Paleozoic, but there are some gaps if you want to go into that, Tom.
Okay, so with the westward expansion basically of the seas, I think that between the Ordovician and Silurian, there was some sort of tectonics going on to the point where you had plumes coming up from basically the deep at that time and interrupting the environments for the Devonian diversity of life right there. Once that, I lost my train of thought. Sorry. Okay, once those plumes started to invade the seas, I think that most of the sea life then was either wiped out, and then the ones that were able to adapt to the new environments were able to escape and then later on died.
Yeah, in Arizona, we really don't. I couldn't find anything on Silurian stuff. I don't think we have Silurian in Arizona.
No, we don't.
So and only a tiny bit of Ordovician, I believe.
Yeah, one thin lens of Ordovician, but that's even hard to get to.
So if you go to the Grand Canyon, there are a number of unconformities. So like you could think about it like you have the Proterozoic rocks at the very bottom, and then you have things like the Moab limestone, which is Cambrian and it's marine, right? Then you have an unconformity, right? And then in most places you'll have sort of like channels cutting down into it that are Temple Butte limestone.
Yeah, right? That's right on top of the Temple Butte.
Yeah, so the Temple Butte's right there, and then you have another unconformity, and you have younger stuff than that. So like you have the Moab limestone, which is Cambrian, and then Temple Butte, which is Devonian, and then all the stuff that's on top of that is younger than that. So it's
So you're missing two time periods basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when you're walking on the Grand Canyon, that would be the Kaibab limestone, correct? Which would be
Yeah,
that's the rim of the Grand Canyon, and that would be the white to yellowish and sometimes grayish sandy limestone.
Yeah, it's cool. A lot of people, they don't really think fossils when they think of the Grand Canyon, but there are a ton of fossils.
Oh yeah,
over there.
Yeah. So I had the privilege of chiseling out a 23-inch long Orthoceras from the bottom of the Mississippian. I forgot the name of that member there. Mooney Falls. That's it. Mooney Falls member. So they had a mass burial there of nautiloids. So very fascinating.
Mm-hmm. And I know we touched upon it a little bit, but so when people think of Arizona, they usually think of a desert environment. But what was Arizona like during the Paleozoic?
Mostly ocean up until the point of the end of the, mid to end Pennsylvania. So they're talking the members of the Naco Formation, and then up into the Toraweep Formation. Between those two, there was cycles going on between transgression and regression of the seas. So you had an advancement of the ocean, and then tectonics happening slightly to a point, causing turbidity currents. And these turbidity currents then would deposit gravels and other larger chunks of material. Then the next thing you know, you have a sandbar type material with just sand deposited on top of that, and back and forth for a period of time between the top of the Mississippian, the Pennsylvanian, up to the bottom of the Permian. Then all of a sudden change, and things started drying out to the point where you had desiccation cracks, and you do have some ripples and drying out of mud flats.
And this is just sort of the central northern part of Arizona. And this is actually a figure that Heidi Marie Johnson
Yes.
used to use quite a bit, which I think is really nice, at least for sort of the kind of the late Devonian, right? You have some of the cities marked out: Flagstaff, Jerome, Payson, just to kind of give you an idea. In the late Devonian, at least the Frasnian, Jerome and outcrops that you would find out around there were probably out here on a marine carbonate shelf. So we'd be out in the shallow ocean. And then Flagstaff and Mount Eldon were going to be a little bit closer to the shore and probably kind of close to like a river delta or something like that. The eastern part,
Estuary type environment.
yeah. And then Payson is sort of the same kind of deal, but probably a little bit maybe more on land. And then the eastern part of the Grand Canyon, so all those channels, those channels, the Temple Butte cutting down into the Muav are probably these channels kind of sitting and cutting down into the that older limestone. But you have these like streams and things that would be cutting down and filling in. That would be the Temple Butte then. So this is at least sort of a snapshot for the late Devonian in Arizona. But like Tom's saying, sea levels change, the shoreline's moving. You get to parts of time, say like in the Permian, where it's drying out, and we have footprints, like actual tetrapod footprints, even though that's not really relevant to this talk. But like if you go out to Roosevelt Lake and places like that, you have, later Paleozoic strata where it's really dry. Obviously, it would have been dry in the time where those animals were alive and making the footprints. So it's not just ocean, but a good chunk of the Paleozoic, most of Arizona would have been underwater to some extent, right?
Mm.
It's like if you look at the picture, the area that's representing like the low land with streams that are tidal channels, and you see Defiance positive area. This is sort of like the southwest end of an arch that's coming from like Minnesota down into Arizona. So you have a number of ocean basins. Most of Arizona would be in sort of this western basin, and then you have the
Yes.
other basins that you think about that you might classically think about for the Devonian, like in Ohio and Catskills and places like that, where you have like Dunkley Osteus and things like that.
What formations would you find the oldest fossils of fish in Arizona?
So I think in Arizona, it's most likely going to be the Martin Formation because, um, like Tom was saying earlier, you don't have the Silurian, at least that we've ever seen, and then the Ordovician that you have is just like a really narrow lens, and then the Cambrian's the Cambrian, and there's not really super recognizable fish in the Cambrian. So
Yeah.
I think it's one of those sort of situations where you just don't see that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that would be late Devonian, correct? The Martin limestone?
Middle
Yeah.
to late
Yeah,
Devonian.
middle to late. Yeah. I mean, so like I guess there's still some discussion there just because the stratigraphy is so like and you need like a really good marker bed, you need some really good index fossils, and that's one of those things that we kind of don't have.
Yeah.
It would be really nice is if the martin if the martin were more like the percha, because the percha has conodonts and brachiopods and things like that. And I don't know that the stratigraphy is any better understood necessarily, but if we had like conodonts in the same layer as the fish that we have in the martin, that would be much better as far as figuring out like what the, like, are we looking at 382 million years ago? Or are we looking at 375 million years ago? Where are we? And
To
that's
my
kind of the,
knowledge, to my knowledge, I don't remember any conodonts in Heidi Marie's
yeah,
papers or any mention of that. And
yeah, no,
I think the oldest conodonts that they have been able to find is lower Mississippian, maybe lower to upper Mississippian. That's about it.
yeah. So, and yeah, so it's kind of one of those situations where we just don't have some of the index fossils that we would really want to nail down the age for certain deposits that we have.
Okay, Grant, maybe if you
Yeah.
can, reverberate how important it is to have those conodonts in succession
Oh
throughout the
yeah.
strata.
Yeah. So
What's the importance of that?
conodonts for the longest time, so conodonts basically are these fossil. I guess you'd say they kind of look like teeth, but they're mouth parts. And for the longest time, people had kind of recognized that you had these different morphologies in sort of a succession through the strata, and you could kind of like you could put them in a relative age position. So like you had certain types of conodonts that were really common um, in kind of association with each other, and you could make like a strat chart, like a chronostratigraphic chart, and you could figure out where strata you were looking at would be relative to each other in time based on these conodonts. As it turns out, conodont their mouth parts, they're kind of like really basal. I don't know if I want to call them fish because they're kind of not
No,
fish per
not really a
se.
fish.
Yeah, they're really weird basal
You
vertebrates,
almost
but
want to say a
not.
leech.
Yeah, kind of. But I mean, they're more fish-like. So
Yeah,
they would have had eyes. Like they finally,
yeah.
yeah, they finally figured it out when they found the soft body preserved of these guys. So they're sort of like what would be something to compare it to, like Amphioxus or like
Oh, there you go. Yes,
yeah,
Amphioxus would be uh, just a little
closer.
lower level than Amphioxus.
Yeah, so like not quite a fish, but also not vertebrate. It's weird. But at any rate, um, conodonts are very helpful as markers in the stratigraphy, so you can figure out where in time you are. And the problem that we're kind of coming up against in some of these deposits in Arizona is that we're not finding conodonts in association with the fossils of like these fish that we're looking at. So we don't really, we don't have rock that we can um, date radiometrically. And then we don't have things like conodonts or brachiopods that we could use as index fossils to figure out where in time we are. So it kind of makes the like putting a date on a particular strata kind of difficult. So I think it's just one of those things where you can kind of say, well, is the Martin Formation late Devonian, middle Devonian, sort of in that time frame
Hmm.
because of the things that are there that we know about, but stratigraphically we don't have as good of an idea of where it is as we would like.
Yeah. So we talked about where you can find these, and we talked about them being in the Martin limestone. So what would the oldest fish in Arizona be then? What do we find within the Martin limestone?
So that's a good question too. I know. So
Antiarch.
can you, yeah, I was going to say it'll probably be a Stereolepis or something along those lines. These are all fish that, I mean, in this case, these are all placoderms that have been found in the Martin limestone. And uh, these are kind of the more common ones. I would say if we were going to find, if you wanted to pin oldest fish in Arizona, you'd be pinning it on one of these guys, just because these are fish that are in the Martin Formation. and are things that have been found. I mean, if we had Silurian rocks, it would be something from the Silurian. If we had Ordovician rocks in better shape, it would, well, I mean, Otis fish, yeah. So if we had Ordovician rocks that had fish in them, then it would be some Ordovician fish, not a placoderm. It would probably be like a stracoderm or something, a heterostracon or something like that. But as far as it goes, since the Martin Formation seems to be the oldest strata that we have definite identifiable fish in, it's going to be one of these guys.
And what is a placoderm for people that don't know?
Yeah, so I mean, you Ben, you had Russell Engelman on, uh, uh, and he talked about Dunkleosteus. Placoderms are these armored fish, like they're all armored. They're probably the first group to have mobile jaws, so they're the first like really jawed fish. So they have armor, like they have these dermal plates, right? So it's they have a head and lower jaw that's completely armored. In the case of arthrodires like Dunkleosteus, there's like this really nice joint between the thoracic armor and the cranial armor, so they can actually move their heads around quite a bit. And I know Russell Engelman talked about the sort of the jointing between those plates when he was talking about placoderm. So the weird thing is the group of the group of placoderms that I've been working with, the antiarchs, right? They have like the head's armored, the torso, the shoulder, and the rest of the body is armored, and then their pectoral appendages are armored too. So they don't have fins like the rest of these placoderms do. The pectoral appendages are completely armored as well, and they look a little bit more like crab legs, and they're really kind of strange. Like if you're thinking about a fish, when you think about you think like pectoral fins, something that they're just kind of like swimming through the water and flopping around, but these guys
Yeah,
don't
it's
have that.
offset.
Yeah, it's really weird. So they have these appendages. They're jointed, so like I guess you would call the joint kind of like the elbow joint, and they're weird. But most of these guys, especially the antiarchs, are probably benthic feeders, so like detritivores. And the vast majority of the placoderms actually seem to have a body type that would imply that they're in a niche where they're in the bottom waters eating things. But then you have things like Dunkleosteus, which is um, clearly nectonic. It'd be swimming around actively hunting things. But that
Yeah,
doesn't seem to
based on the pectoral fin, right?
yeah. So the body types for these placoderms, um, there's a huge variety, right? Like if Ben, you probably remember the talk I gave for SPS, however many months ago that was, when we talked about the different types of placoderms. There's a wide variety, and and I know it's going to get into another question that we're going to ask about whether or not they're all related, whether or not they're monophyletic or paraphyletic or whatever. Um, but okay, not to get off topic. So they have mobile jaws. They're in a bunch of different niches. These guys are really, really like kind of the big thing for the Silurian and especially the Devonian. They're this really cosmopolitan group of armored fish. Um, what else do I want to say about that?
So do you want to go into the phylogeny briefly on it?
Yeah,
Yeah, sure. We can do that. So can you guys see this tree?
I like it.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the tree. I know that Russell Engelman used this tree, so I just kind of stole it from him because I thought it was really good. So at the top, you have the jawless fish. So like I guess this would be like a lamprey or a hagfish. So you have the agnatha. So it's representative of all of these basically all of the jawless fish. And that's including the armored ones that we're not really that interested in for this talk. But then on this tree that includes basically every other fish, the antiarchs are in sort of this basal group. So the placoderms you could consider basically everything from Antiarcha down to Egtelanathus down here with the question mark. And I guess the question mark is there as sort of a, like, where is this guy relative to things like sharks and bony fish, right? Because if you'll remember, like when you had Russell Engelman on, he was talking. One of the things he talked about was Egtelanathus and how it has features that would seem to place it closer to other jawed fish like bony fish and sharks than it does to other placoderms. So one of the things, like, I know people are always kind of arguing about whether or not placoderms are monophyletic or paraphyletic. So yeah, I mean, this, you could kind of make of it what you will, I would say. I'm not really
It's
like.
all based. Oh, sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Isn't it all based on the development of the jaws?
Yeah, I mean, so it's all really about like what's going on with the jaws,
Right.
to some extent the articulation of the dermal plates and things like that. But I mean, really, it is about what's going on with the jaws. So like what elements you have in the jaws, what those elements are doing,
And with the
and
jaw hinge as well.
yeah, so it's one of those things where you could split it. How I think you could probably split it however you like, depending on what characters you're looking at, how you want to consider them in relation to other groups of fish. So it's monophyletic, paraphyletic, polyphyletic, however you want to think about that. I would say probably paraphyletic, just because, um, like, especially based on a tree like this, you have this group with the antiarchs that are like really, really basal to everything else, and then things that are much more close to like chondrichthyans and bony fish.
Yeah, and it's also important to note too that these type of phylogenetic charts, they're still pretty speculative. Like there's
Yeah,
a
I mean, it's
lot
a
of
hypothesis.
yeah, there's a lot of conflicting hypotheses on this. And one of the things that kind of throws a wrench in it is that we find dermal denticles or skin scales that are very reminiscent of chondrichthyans all the way back into the middle Ordovician, which
Yeah,
is well before when we find any placoderms. So that
right.
also
Yeah.
that's
Well,
also a
well,
problem.
here's an idea for you. With those dermal denticles, Dr. Elliott really had a hypothesis about this. Now, Dave Elliott is one of the world's researchers on Paleozoic fishes, and he suggested that it's possible that the dermal denticles can withstand a lot of transportation and weathering. So they were washed in from another area down into the environment, and they were probably reworked and then probably eaten by other things and spit out later and deposited. Grant, you were talking about your your coastal rivers
Yeah.
washing into the ocean as an estuary type environment.
Right.
Well, probably from other environments where the um, the famous Petrotus shark with the denticles and all that probably lost its denticles somewhere else. Those
And then it
washed
washed
in
in. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
deposited into this other environment.
Yeah.
So
And
it's
so
possible.
if we go back and we think about, probably remember, when Heidi was working on when Heidi Marie was working on the Mount Eldon material.
Yes. Yeah. That's a
Right.
classic example.
So yeah, so a classic
Yes.
example. Uh, the strata are very clearly marine, but you have fossils that have washed in. Like, you have material
Yes.
that's washed in that's been very clearly
Yes.
transported and tumbled and are broken up,
Yes.
alongside better preserved, clearly marine material. So you would have had, especially with these placoderms, a lot of these guys seemingly were making the journey into fresh water. So they would have been up in streams and then died and been washed out
Of course.
into the shallow marine environment and been worked in with with the marine fauna.
Well, consider this too. You also have uplift happening, upwellings and stuff like that happening in the mid marine carbonate shelf, and that probably blocked off their access back into the ocean.
Yeah.
And then that was, I don't know, sealed off as a lagoonal area. And then they were forced to, survive in that type of environment and then later died.
Oh, okay. So yeah. So one of what Tom's just thinking about, I think, especially with reference to say like our guys.
There we go. No,
yeah, here we go.
That one right there.
Yeah. So one of the things that Heidi Marie Johnson was thinking about, right, was I like using this slide because this really paints a picture of how Heidi Marie Johnson was thinking about the Asterolepis material that we have from Payson.
Yes.
So it's a bone bed. It's just this one taxon, Asterolepis, and seemingly what this would kind of mean is because we're getting it just this one taxon in this bed, and they're really nice. Like if you, I wish I had better pictures so that people could see just how nice these specimens are. Articulated, not transported at all. Basically, they're in position that they probably would have been in when they died. And the only destruction to any of this material is by erosion. So you have really nice specimens. And Heidi Marie's idea was that these guys were probably swimming in like a river or something like that, and you had flooding. They got washed out onto the floodplain into an area that they couldn't swim out of. And eventually they would have died. And that's kind of what you're seeing in this picture, right? You have something in a main trunk of a river, and they get washed out in the flood, and they're in some other channel that then slowly runs out of oxygen. They all die, and then they get covered over by another avulsion of the river. So and this is the sort of thing actually that you see much more often in deposits in the eastern part of the United States. So like in Ohio and the Catskills and places like that. For things like Bothriolapis, you see large groups of these guys in deposits where they've died like en masse, and they're really well preserved. So sort of probably a similar situation here where you have these fish getting into a spot that they couldn't get out of. They run out of oxygen, they die, then they get covered over.
And I guess this is a good segue too into what exactly Asterolepis is and why that's a significant fossil that you're studying in particular.
Yeah, sure. So Asterolepis is an antiarch. It's an antiarch placoderm. So these are I guess you'd say, really, really basal placoderms. They look a bit like an armored like rugby ball with a tail. That's kind of how I describe them to people.
Clubfish.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a weird, what did other people call this like weird, like, what did Russell call it? Like an armored tadpole thing. Anyway, so like their whole body and head and pectoral appendages are all armored, and then their tail on, so basically from the anus to the tip of their tail is not doesn't have dermal plates. It's scaled in this case. Asterolepis is pretty heavily scaled, so this guy is really, really armored, and they have sort of a, like if you think about, they have their orbits are kind of like sort of like goggles. It's centrally placed on the top of their head, so their eyes are on the top
cranial.
of their head.
I think there's a reason for that, and it's just like what you would see in what are those creatures called? Triops.
Yeah, yeah, kind of like that.
Okay, so if you think about triops, they call them dinosaur shrimp or
Shrimp, yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
But if you think about it now, I used to play with those, but they are basically in a muddy environment with
Right.
very low oxygen. And so then, the best thing they can do is bury themselves in the mud and have their nasal and their eyes above the surface there of the mud and maybe their tail.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you see that a lot with other benthic animals too. Like you see crocodilians, their eyes going up to
Yeah.
the top of their heads, things like mud skippers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lungfish do that too.
Yeah. So these guys have, sort of that setup. It's pretty clear that they are benthic creatures. Like they're in the bottom water, they're in the mud, probably eating whatever little tiny things there are in the mud. Some of the specimens that we have, like we have this really good selection of specimens of various body sizes. So we have really young ones, like this little guy on the left that's in the picture there. We call him little guy because it's pretty much the smallest specimen that we have. But we have specimens that are 4, 5, 6 times the size of this guy, right? So like we have this little guy, he's about the size of a softball, and we have some that are, um, larger than the largest dinner plate you've probably ever eaten off of, or like a pizza pie kind of thing, like a
There you
pizza
go.
pan pizza kind of deal. So we have a really good ontogenetic series for these guys, and one of the things that I've been looking to do is um, really nail that down to look to see how their morphology changes as they get older and bigger.
Something to consider, this environment that they were trapped in.
Yeah.
Think about this. If you have volcanic vents every once in a while setting off their plumes,
Hmm.
and you've got your iron oxide,
Yeah.
possibly magnesium and all that, and that settles down into the estuary or tidal flat or whatever they're, burrowing into or whatever. And that's probably disrupting the environment, killing off their food source.
Right. And there's another thing that there's another option as far as that we can consider that we'll talk about, I think, when we talk about the Devonian extinction. But yeah, I mean, that's
Sorry.
a thing to consider. No, it's good because it kind of ties in to a lot of the other stuff that we're going to talk about.
Yeah. And briefly, let's talk about some of the other placoderms from the Martin, as well as some of the other fish that are known from there.
Okay, so I kind of wish I had put more pictures now. um, so uh, so you have Asterolepis and Bothrialepis. Those are both antiarchs. They're kind of sort of similar looking, not exactly, but so these sort of benthic forms. And then you have Tictotus, which I guess the easiest way to describe that guy would be sort of like looks a bit like a chimera.
A basal shark?
Well, no,
That,
it's not. It's not. But I mean, so it looks like the Tictotus would look sort of like a chimera does. Like so that if you've ever seen that fish, the chimera,
Okay.
that's kind of what Tictotus would look like,
yeah, and
except that
they're interesting.
it's not a chimera, it's a placoderm.
So they do kind of superficially resemble a chimera. They also have claspers like what you see in Chondrichthyans, which is really interesting.
Well, and that's the thing
So
that
they
it,
have wrinkled jaws then,
yeah, so they have what
like
do
a
you
like
want
a radiated jaw.
yeah, so Ben, I don't know if you want to call it teeth per se, tooth plates or something like that, but so they have
A palate.
yeah, so they have basically, like mouth parts that they could use to like crush brachiopods and stuff like that.
Yeah. And
I
it's
could
funny,
see that.
those even convergently look similar to
Yeah, and those look similar to what you
holocephalian
see
teeth.
in yeah. Um so yeah, there's a lot of I guess you would just say convergence. Like it's a niche thing, right? It's the thing that they're doing in the environment and they've evolved towards that sort of thing where if they're eating brachiopods and stuff like that, of course they're going to take on a form that's similar to some other later fish that's doing the same thing. So let's see what else. Then Denisanotus, Eldonosteius, and Cacosteius are all these sort of like arthrodire types. So to be more like
A pitted jaw.
yeah, so it'd be more like sort of like I think this is sort of representative of like Cacosteius and then Dunkleosteus. So we don't have anything
Yes.
quite as big as all of that. So I think the thing to compare most of the arthrodires to would be this representation of Cacosteius. So something sort of in between like benthic and nectonic, something that's moving in the direction of being like an apex predator. So, but these are all like, if you think about it, these aren't deep water fish. These are
Shallow
shallow
marine.
marine fish. So like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
and it's one of the reasons where like when we talk about the Devonian mass extinction later and the things that are probably causing that, why it's hitting this group particularly hard is because they're in shallow water. They're not adapted for, you know, going out into the open ocean to get away from some of the conditions that are probably happening.
Would it be possible Arthur Dyer would be a coral chomper?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, so like there are a number of different forms, like the cranial anatomy, the jaw anatomy, and stuff like that. And these
Yeah.
guys
It's
is
got strong
pretty,
jaws.
yeah.
So with placoderms, and let's talk about the Devonian extinction and why we don't see any placoderms going into the Carboniferous.
Well, I mean, so that's kind of an I would say no brainer, right? Because
Major environment change.
yeah, so major things are going on.
I mean, you got tectonics starting to happen, so
Yeah, so
their environment's going to be destroyed.
there's a lot of different things going on. So like Tom's talking about the tectonics, and what he means is you have Laurussia, like the northern continents, and then Gondwana, the southern continents, are coming together to make Pangea as we're getting towards the end of the Paleozoic. So all of these shallow marine environments that were really super important for the vast majority of the fish that we're going to talk about and have talked about, those environments are gone. So, especially once you get out of the Devonian and you get in like into the Carboniferous and the Permian, all of those shallow water environments are gone.
Yeah.
So things are either hiking out of that into the open ocean to become more nectonic forms, or they're making them move more inland into freshwater and, you know, lacustrine environments. So one of the things that happens, and like the reason we're not seeing these guys in the Carboniferous, is because of what's happening at the end of the Devonian. So can you guys see that?
Nothing.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Oh,
Yeah.
reef collapse. I like this.
Yeah. So there's a couple of different things going on at the end of the Devonian, right? And it's not just like the very, very end of the Devonian, right? Going into the Carboniferous. It's kind of the latter, I guess, third or so of the Devonian, really. Like, so from the Frasnian on, things are really changing. One of the things that's happening is on land. So you'll probably remember that plants kind of really get their start like at the end of the Ordovician, and it's the Silurian where we really started to get lots of land plants, and they're going
Yeah,
everywhere.
you got Cooksonia there. So
Yeah,
that
so
was
by the time we get to the late Devonian, you have these large arborescent forms like Archaeopteris and other tree type plants. So like at the very end of the Devonian, you have the first real forests, and they're really spreading out. What they see is through a lot of the Paleozoic, CO2 is pretty high, and
yes,
oxygen kind of makes a dip down into the Devonian. Like it's
yes.
it's not really high, but particularly in the Devonian, oxygen levels are pretty low. So you have really high CO2 and really low oxygen. And one of the things that happens is once these trees start coming in, they're drawing down that CO2. So it has a huge impact on the atmosphere. And one of the things that's happening in the Devonian probably is that part of what's going on is the trees cool the planet down. Especially so like in the Fomenian at the very end of the Devonian, you get into glaciation. Some of that's going to have something to do with the trees affecting the atmosphere, and some of it's going to have to do with tectonics because you're moving the continents, and it's that has an impact on temperature too. So specifically in the Frasnian with the Kellwasser event, one of the things that is happening, and I think Tom mentioned this earlier, is ocean anoxia. So these shallow water environments are getting hit with there are these multiple anoxic events. And if you can't get out of the way, right? If you can't
Yeah,
move to someplace else, you're
you're
dead.
gone.
Yeah, and that's what the biggest thing that really hits the placoderms are these anoxic events, and they just don't really make it out of that.
Well, that would also explain the abundance of the Devonian corals.
Right. And so one of the other things that happens with this anoxic event is all the coral the reef builders in the Devonian, they get hit really hard too, and everything that's
Yep.
dependent on those reefs
Yep.
die out. So like even if you made it through an anoxic event, if the reef builders that you're dependent on don't make it through, then you're done. So like you get kind of this double whammy at the end of the Devonian, where you have the anoxic events, you have the reef collapse, and then later you have glaciation. So if you were one of these warm, shallow water loving fish, you get hit twice because
Yeah.
the reef environment gets decimated, and then you have glaciation. So the vast majority of things like the placoderms just don't make it through this. And that's the reason we don't see them in the Carboniferous.
Wow.
Well,
Yeah.
by that time, it started to dry out anyway.
Yeah, that too. So like if you think about it, like you have this extinction event, and then you have the loss of those shallow marine environments, just period. So like even if the reef builders had made it through and the fish had made it through, if you don't have the shallow marine environment to be in, it doesn't matter if you made it through the extinction because you're going to get wiped out anyway because there's not as much shallow marine environments anymore.
Yeah, I like that point.
Yeah.
I'm glad you
Yeah.
brought that up.
Yeah,
Kellwasser.
I was thinking about it. I was thinking about it. It's very it's really important to have a really good understanding of everything that's going on so that you
Well,
can.
think about this too: as Surprise Canyon formation in Grand Canyon. Do you think that's due to turbidity currents washing in remnants of glaciation, the melting of glaciers?
Hmm. I mean, that could be right.
Just a thought.
Yeah.
So going into the Carboniferous, you really see a faunal turnover. So the placoderms, they become extinct, and what you see is Chondrichthyans, they really take over. Chondrichthyans, they were good in the Devonian, but they get really good in the Carboniferous. You see all of this. You see a big expansion of different taxa, different body forms, and all of that stuff going on. And Arizona is a really good spot for Carboniferous Chondrichthyans. So, Tom, do you want to go over some of the formations that we can find Chondrichthyans and other fish in Arizona?
Sure. We can start out at the middle to lower level of the Mississippian red wall, and we have the presence of possibly rays and skates, that type of material, along with cochleodonts. You get some sort of hybidont type um, pointed tooth sharks coming up through the middle Mississippian, and that would include the Redwall limestone possibly Temple Butte underneath that. And then you get up into what we call the Naco Formation, which extends from central Arizona down to Mexico and then over into New Mexico. And that right there is such a centralized inland sea. And I think the sharks dominated that more so than the ones in the later Paleozoic time periods.
Yeah,
So
and
you had the flourishing of your what we call clean coral reef environments, where you had enough nutrients there in their environment to thrive. So then you had the diversity of fish, of course, and then the diversity of arthropods and things like that. And they were probably feeding on that. And then plus the coral just expanded from there.
yeah.
So
And
these
you
environments from the mid to I'm sorry, lower to mid Mississippian on up to basal um, Permian, you had the invasion of basically the Chondrichthyans.
Yeah, and you brought up something interesting, saying like rays and skates and that stuff. So in Arizona, we have these really cool fossils that they may not be true rays or true skates, but they are these really basal stem neoselacians. So neoselacians would be like the sharks and the rays and the skates. And we have things like Amarodontis and Cooliella with Cooliella having teeth, some of them looking pretty ray-like, some of these teeth also look very shark-like too, which is really fascinating. So you see the emergence of the Neoselacians evolving in the Carboniferous, and we see that in Arizona, which is awesome. And you mentioned cochleodonts; those are really cool too. When you think of cochleodonts, think of them as kind of these uglier versions of chimeras that are alive today.
We used to call them brush heads
Yeah. They
because they have
basically,
ornamental spines and brushes on the top of their heads.
yeah, they look wild. Um, Chimeras kind of look pretty adorable today, but back in the Carboniferous, you had these cochleodonts that really weren't a great sight to see. Deltotus is a really common one from the Pennsylvanian Age Naco Formation. One of the public fossil sites in Arizona that I've been to many times, as I'm sure you have, Tom.
I
The
founded that site.
Yeah, yeah, the Indian Gardens Paleo site. We could find tons of cochleodont teeth. And do you want to talk about the Indian Gardens Paleo site and how that came to be?
Okay, so as a background, um, the universities needed some place to take their grad students to do paleo work. And the old site, which was called the Cole Ranch site, was about a mile north of the Indian Gardens current site. And it was only a small outcrop of Naco Desmonesian time period in the Pennsylvania. And it was very distinct because it only had certain types of coral, but not other types of coral. So the zoning in there was the photic zone, basically, of the ocean where light comes in, but it only goes in a certain extent. So they're guesstimating between 15 feet deep down to 330 feet deep. So this was a continental shelf type environment with occasional turbidity currents. So these currents would stir up the sediment and that would draw in new species of sharks, skates, and ray type material or type species in there. And they'd be attracted to that. And then plus only a certain type of bryozoan and coral would be in that environment. So right there, it was kind of a localized niche for these sharks to hang out to feed on coral or whatever other fishes. And although we haven't found any skeletal remains of your normal fish, things like that, we just only find the teeth and the part vertebra. So we're thinking that, these were cartilaginous fish and sharks. and they were feeding on brachiopods, bryozoans, that, and they hung around in that certain environment for quite a while and did their thing. Then suddenly there was a change. You had what they call caetes, which would be a cyclic um, event where you would have a slight transgression, regression of the ocean, and that caused cycles to happen. And then you would have the invasion of rivers flooding an estuary. And so then that somewhat ruined the environment for the sharks, and they had to go somewhere else. And some died right there.
Yeah.
Does that kind of make sense?
Mm-hmm. And another thing to bring up too is when paleontologists use the term shark, it doesn't necessarily mean the same thing as when a marine biologist does. So, within marine biology, you'll see sharks used, and that's basically used for the coelacanths, which are like your great whites, your hammerheads, your carpet sharks, your cow sharks, things like that, like anything within coelacanth. Whereas paleontologists, it tends to be a lot more loose, and some people use it for the elasmobranchs, which includes all of the sharks, plus the rays, plus some of these extinct offshoots. And then some people also use it to refer to all of these chondrichthyans. So that would like lump in the ratfish and stuff too. So just
Yeah,
so
that's why I
people,
included the skates and the rays in that previous conversation for that reason.
yeah, because you would have these stem Neoselacians, but they aren't necessarily either of those. They're like that right when these things started basically evolving. At least the first evidence of them we have would be in the Mississippian. And some of these interesting shark relatives that we have there, one of them would be Glickmanius, which was probably the apex predator of this environment, of the Naco Formation. So Glickmanius was a decently sized shark relative. I mean, it probably would have been around the size of your average great white at some of these large examples. I find a lot of small Glickmanius teeth, which would have been from a smaller animal, in the Indian Gardens paleo site, but they did have the potential to get bigger than that. And yeah, this would have probably been eating anything that it wanted to as far as the other shark relatives, because this was a
Yeah,
shark relative dominated area. We don't find a ton of evidence of bony fish material. We mostly find chondrichthyan stuff in the Naco Formation. And Glickmanius, it was a tenocanth, so it had these cladodont style teeth, which is a long median cusp, had some smaller lateral cusplets, and a lingually extended tooth base. So that's the
yes,
cladodont style tooth.
Hmm.
yeah, it's somewhat slanted tooth cusp in the center.
Yeah. Yeah, so you find those. Some other interesting ones. I found a Simorioid tooth, which was pretty cool in the Naco Formation.
Yes,
Simorioids are they're also cladodon style teeth, but these are actually considered to be on the euchondrocephalin side of things, so more like the ratfish side than the shark side of
right.
the family tree. And the reason for that was some brain case findings from Michael Coates et al. In
Yes.
I think that was 2017.
So
So
let me go over some of the species there. So we the most dominant seem to be Deltotus, Sandilotus, and Lagorotus. So these are the palate jawed sharks, basically, with wrinkles on their teeth.
mhm.
Best way to describe it. And so then we also have Petalotus. Thank you.
Yeah, petal
I
lotus.
get
There
tongue
you go.
tied.
Petalotus,
Okay,
yeah.
Petalotus. And we have some Agassizotus, um, Petrotus.
What's really cool is particularly in the Naco Formation, but it'll, I suspect, be in other Mississippian formations in Arizona as more research gets done. A particularly high diversity of these chondrichthyans compared to some other sites. Like it's astonishing how many chondrichthyans you can find there in
What's
Arizona.
very what's very interesting is Now, in the Permian, we have the same exact kind of teeth as down there in the Pennsylvania Naco at Indian Gardens, with a few different varieties. So, Xenocanthus type thing and Bronsonella.
Yeah, and there are xenocants in more freshwater type of environments too that have also been found in
Yes,
the Pennsylvanian of
yes,
Arizona. So those are that's another cool thing. Xenocants are another group of elasmobranchs, so they are still along like the shark side of the Chondrichthyan split, and they're really interesting teeth. They're not cladodon style, but they're what's called diplodon style. And that's because they have two lateral cusplets that
and then
are
one
large.
small in the middle.
Yeah,
Yes,
and they could either have none or very small ones in the middle. And they also have that lingually extended tooth base, like what you would find
yes,
in
yes,
cladodons. But they do have a lot of times what's called this orolingual button that's on that tooth base as well. So you might see like a little raised bump on there.
yes, yes.
What are those guys doing with those teeth? Just as an example to everyone.
Wow. Well,
What'd you think?
definitely fish, but some of them are eating brachiopods and probably coral or
Okay.
the algae from the coral.
Yeah,
All
and I
right.
think some people like Bob Bacher have hypothesized in Texas that some of those orthocanthus were eating some of these proto-mammals, and he has depictions of like Dimetrodon and orthocanthus, duking it out.
And Dimetrodon always wins
I got
because
to see that.
yeah, and if you ooh, what book would that be in? So like Dinosaur Heresies, if you want to go real way back
Yeah.
in the 80s, right? When Bob Bacher when he published Dinosaur Heresies, there's a picture, there's a drawing that he did of Dimetrodon, like pulling orthocanthus out of the water kind of thing.
Yeah, he
Um,
he
yeah,
hypothesized that Dimetrodon was going in the water and hunting these freshwater orthocanthus.
Well, here's the thing. In another area, we have this is in north central Payson area, and we have a plant locality. And this plant locality is bearing, a variety of plants from Walshia on down to, oh, what was the other one? The fern-like one. Help me out. Not Glossopteris, Neuropterus.
Neuropterus. Okay.
Yeah, Neuropterus, and some grasses and stuff like that. Well, we do find, and I have it right here, freshwater shark coprolites,
That's
Interesting.
pretty cool.
and that's what this is.
All
That's a
right.
freshwater shark coprolite right there.
Interesting.
So it's spiraled. It's very simple, and more than likely it'd have fish scales in it. So I find quite a few of these right in with the bone bed that's right there in between the plant layer and the turbidity current layer, which would be the pebble stone.
Okay.
So right in between that. So, it's possible that you had these freshwater sharks invading the swamps, and doing their thing and probably being attacked.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And xenocants were very successful in that type of niche. I mean, they're one of these few ancient Chondrichthyan groups that make it into the Triassic. And you can even find some of them, some xenocants in the Chinle Formation, for example, so late Triassic.
Yep.
They don't make
Yep.
it past there, but they're one of those few holdovers. And we'll talk about why that is, why a lot of these Chondrichthyans became extinct later. But to move on, getting there, let's talk about the Permian. What formations do we find Permian fish in Arizona?
We do have them. We do have them in the upper Toroweep formation, and then all the way throughout the Kaibab formation. But the best preserved would be the beta member of the Kaibab, which would be the lower level. And we do have very large Satinopetalotus within a very thin horizon of siltstone mixed in with carbonate limestone.
And
So,
Megatinopatalis is, for those that don't know, these had some of the largest teeth of any chondrichthyan ever.
yes,
Like their teeth will rival a megalodon's in size. It is crazy.
yes,
Some of them getting like that big, like 6 inches.
right.
It's absurd. And
But
these were a patelodon style tooth, so they're very thin, kind of leaf shaped. They'd have many pointed cusps on them, and they kind of have a curvature, but they're really cool. The fish itself wasn't megalodon size. It was pretty, small compared to that, but their teeth are massive.
So
we
is
do
that
have rather large, 2.5 to 3 inch long cladodont teeth as well.
hmm,
And there's 2 or 3 of them that are from the Kaibab Formation in Flagstaff. So one of my former students, geology for kids students, had found in Flagstaff one of the most abundant horizons in the beta member of the Kaibab. And this is sandy limestone, almost to the point where it's beach sand
hmm.
and it's unconsolidated, and you scoop right into it and you can screen wash the material. And we've come out with numerous species, and J.P. Hodnett put out quite a few papers on those. So ranging from Bronsonella up to, I'd hate to say it, but the devilfish, the carpet shark, the predatory cladodonts, and what was the other one? Agassiz otis.
You get some really cool, yeah. So Bransonella is really cool. That's a
Yes,
marine xenocanthamorph. So picture that diplodon style tooth design, but now a shark relative that is that's mostly going to be living in your marine environments rather than one that's living in your primarily freshwater environments. So those are pretty cool. I think
well,
the cladodon you're
okay.
talking, what?
Sorry, can I interrupt you on that?
Yeah.
Okay, now there's one place in Flagstaff that we did find ripple marks mixed in with the unconsolidated beach material, sand mixed in with the hardened um, dolomite limestone. And all three had the same teeth,
Hmm.
all three environments, which was a shock for JP. He couldn't figure it out. Okay, I had to interrupt you on that. Sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
So
And
we had an estuary style environment there along with the lagoonal area. Okay, sorry, I won't interrupt anymore.
oh, you're good. So the Cladodont you were talking about, that would be Kybobvinator, right?
Yes. Yep, you got it.
Yeah, those are really cool because those have serrations on them on their
Yep.
cutting edges,
Yep.
which is a really cool feature. You don't see that much in the Paleozoic at all.
Very unusual.
Yeah. You see that in Carcharopsis, which I don't believe has been found in Arizona, but for the most part, this is a very rare feature for anything in the
Yes.
Paleozoic.
So is the
Yeah.
serration like an adaptation for eating particularly large prey, or
Oh, of course. Yeah.
yeah?
I mean, you would have to bite, slice, and swallow, basically.
So these sharks would probably have been tackling things that are pretty large. So it'd be like kind of
Well,
like Ben, like when you talk about the like whale eating sharks, right? That like
okay.
great whites and
Well,
things like that.
we do have Philodont. Now, Philodont has a palate jaw,
Okay.
and they have cone-shaped disc teeth.
Hmm.
And I have some in my cabinet right now, and we found a nearly complete Philodont with the jaw structure and everything, and that wasn't more than, I'd say, 12, 13 inches long.
Hmm.
So, you know, just about every strata we find there in Flagstaff, we find Philodont. So that's one of the most abundant, and more than likely the sharks were feeding on those.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
these are a bony fish.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, bony fish. Yes,
Hmm.
I forgot to mention that. Johnson and Zidek, 1996, somewhere in there, did a really good paper on philodonts from Flagstaff.
Mm.
Johnson and Zidek, and
Yeah.
then so did the professor that at NAU a while back was Stan Buse. So he reported on those as well.
Yeah. Overall, though, you do see a much larger diversity in chondrichthyans than you do in bony fish in Arizona and the Permian. And the chondrichthyans are super diverse too in the Kaibab, kind of like what you see in the Naco. It's insane, the diversity in those.
Yeah.
So, do you think the diversity that you're seeing in the chondrichthyans has to do more with preservation, or is it actually like actual diversity? Like,
So it could have some to do with preservation, but I think most of it is that these cartilaginous fish, they would have taken up so many different niches in their
mhm.
environments, and we can see that with their tooth morphology structures, that these were specializing in an assortment of different niches. And I think that
Yes.
chondrichthyans really took on a lot of these roles that nowadays we see heavily dominated by bony fish.
Right.
Well, we'll consider this too. Now, remember, you had these, I would say, somewhat isolated or near isolated continental shelf environments, and that would allow for more localized niche,
Hmm.
and a certain variety of fish and shark and all that would live in such that area.
Yeah.
So think about that.
Yeah, it'd be considerably less cosmopolitan than say
Yeah, there
like
you
during the
go.
Devonian, right? So like
There,
during the
yeah, there you
Devonian,
go. Yeah,
during the Devonian, right, you have all of these shallow water environments on the continents that are all connected to each other. So things
yes,
could go back and forth. But in the
yes.
Permian, because you're losing those connections, right, you have
Well,
these more localized environments for things to adapt into.
but what we find odd in the Permian is wherever we find the shark's teeth, we do not see coral.
Mm,
We see an abundance of brachiopods.
right,
We see an abundance of other bony fish fragments, things like that.
right.
And the strangest thing, trilobites. You have these local, okay, I mean, I'm sure you've seen them, these, what they call atolls,
Yeah.
in
Like
these
a coral
talls,
atoll sort of thing. Yeah.
yeah, coral atolls, and they have such a localized species or niche, whatever. And hardly any other thing invades that area unless you get aggressive, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so then I see this all along, even in from, Nevada down through northeastern Arizona or northwestern Arizona on down through to Texas. So you have these localized niches every once in a while,
Yeah.
and they're
That
well
makes sense.
preserved.
Yeah.
And how did the Permian end for those that
Wow.
don't know?
Well, we've got somewhat evidence of talus flows mixing in with estuary environments and with lagoonal environments. So something's causing those talus flows to wash in, get worked up by the waves, and deposited with the carbonates. That kind of makes sense. So something's going on the continent itself, causing overflowing of river systems or whatever, washing in that talus flow into the environment, and then just covering the whole area. So we have evidence that at the contact of the Moenkopi and the top of the Kaibab. And another thing too is the paper that I submitted there back in what was it 2001, trace fossils as paleoclimatic indicators. of
Mhm.
the Permian Kaibab,
Yeah.
we have salt casts. And these are rather large salt casts mixed in with the burrows of arthropods and gastropods, you name it. So you have some sort of environment there that's causing the drying out of mudflats, estuaries, that type of environment, plus the washing in of um, talus flows.
Mm-hmm.
Does
And
that
this
kind of
would
make
have been,
sense?
yeah, and
Yeah.
this would have been the Siberian traps, correct?
Oh,
Yeah. So like if you're
I never
thinking
thought about that.
well, if you're thinking about the larger global picture, Ben,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So Tom's talking about what's happening locally,
Mm-hmm.
right? And sort of that very localized picture. So you're seeing what he's talking about is sort of the evidence of what's going on there. Like you can
Mm-hmm.
see very localized things happening. And then at the larger scale, you're thinking about the Siberian traps and the
Yeah.
impact that that's having on the atmosphere and then in turn the ocean and everything else.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, so
Okay.
like you're taking sort of like Tom's localized picture and then the global picture, and Tom's realizing sort of he's making a connection there, which I think is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. And let's talk about the global picture of the great dying and why marine life and therefore fish would have been particularly susceptible to this.
The breakup of Pangea.
So I think if like we're gonna talk about like the sort of the big picture, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
if part of the big picture was for the Devonian was the continents coming together.
Oh, well, that, yes.
Part
I
of
thought
part
he
of
meant at
what's
the end of the Permian.
No, he's talking about the Permian. So like so
Okay.
if we backpedal a little bit to think about the Devonian, part of what's going on is the creation of Pangea. And then
Okay.
at the end of the Permian, right, you have the start of the breakup of Pangea. So
Yes.
it's the two end members, if you think about it, like what's happening to depositional environments at the end of the Devonian has everything to do with the creation of Pangea, and the stuff that's happening at the end of the Permian has everything to do with the start of the breakup of Pangea. So um, sort of like full circle kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And so Ben was talking about Siberian traps, right? It's this huge area of volcanism and long-term volcanism too, not just a large area on
Right.
one big eruption. It is a
Right.
huge area of magmatic activity. So like you have this huge area, this gigantic, like all pretty much like all of Siberia sort of thing. If you think about it, you have this large area where lava's out on the surface, and it's over a really long periods of time, and it has a huge impact on the climate and the environments nearby and the rest of the world. So it's
Well, globally too, because remember the Permian red beds. The Permian red beds are global.
yeah,
So
yeah,
you've got the same type of mineralization in Paris as you have here,
yeah,
or even in London or whatever with the red beds. So consider that. I mean, yeah, you had to have extreme volcanic activity with, your wet to dry plumes of volcanic ash, that type of stuff, heavily laid it down with iron content, and then distributed throughout the landscape.
yeah. So on land, even though we're not necessarily talking about that sort of thing, right? Like that has a huge impact. And then all of that washing into the ocean has a huge impact too. So you
There you
have
have it.
so
Mm-hmm.
in the ocean, all this volcanic material that's going in, you have bacteria in the ocean then that are eating a lot of that material and pulling oxygen out of the water and killing things. So
Mm-hmm.
it's
Well,
a
can I?
different sort of anoxia by comparison to what's happening at the end of the Devonian. But like
Mm-hmm.
same kind of deal. Like you're changing the chemistry of the ocean water. Bacteria are reacting to that, basically stripping oxygen from the water, and everything that needs that oxygen is going to die. So,
Yeah. Can I interject here real quick? Sorry.
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Now, um, this has been of interest because I grew up in the area, and this is in the White Mountains area. We had found a very distinct sandstone layer that's between the contact of the Moenkopi and the Permian Kaibab.
Hmm.
And it ranges between 1.5 feet to maybe 2.5 feet thick. And what they have, it's ironized sandstone, basically.
Okay. Yeah.
So you have Lysengang rings in different shapes and stuff like that scattered throughout the sandstone as if the material has been melted and then spread throughout the sandstone. And then as it oxidized, all the mineralization spread throughout the soft sediment and solidified.
Hmm.
It's got the strangest shapes of iron that's been oxidized, and the sandstone is yellow, all the same sand grain. So
Mm-hmm.
medium to fine grain sand
Okay.
with all these Lysengang features in it. Then on top of that, you have a somewhat pebble conglomerate carbonate.
Hmm.
And that would explain the talus flows that float over the top of this beach flat type estuary. Although
Interesting.
we find no fossils in that ironized sandstone, which I find unusual.
That is interesting. And going back on what happens, what you see the difference between like the Permian faunas and the Triassic ones with the fish. Um, Most of these diverse chondrichthyans go away. So we don't see any patelodonts anymore. We don't see any simoriforms anymore. There were reports saying that there were simoriforms and like other cladodonts in the early Cretaceous, but these are most likely going to be Salacians that convergently evolved a cladodont-style tooth design. But yeah, so you don't see a lot of these major groups of chondrichthyans that that were super prominent throughout the Carboniferous and the Permian, going on
Well,
into the Triassic. You're really left with your Euselacians, which would be your sharks and that
okay,
lineage. So you
okay.
do see stem sharks at the very, like, just starting out in the Permian. You see them, but they don't really start diversifying until the Triassic. Hybodonts are a big one that survive. They make it out. And we do have some cool hybodonts in the Kaibab, like Diablodontus. And you see xenocants, but they are like in their tail end, they go extinct in the Triassic. And you see chimeriforms. Those are one of the last groups of the euchondrocephalans that make it out. And you see eugenodonts, which are the whorl tooth shark relatives, but they're also very scarce in the Triassic and become extinct there. So
Hmm.
Yeah.
really, it's the Euselacian line and the chimeriforms that are able to successfully make it out and survive past the Triassic. We don't see the stem groups of sharks, or at least the beginnings of them, that like we can identify as like from these crown groups until the Jurassic. So in the Triassic, the ones that we see are still like these early stem stem sharks, but we don't see like say the lamniforms until the um, like until later. We don't see the hexanchiforms until the Jurassic and things like that. But yeah,
Okay.
so there is a big faunal change in the Permian. And it's interesting because we do have some freshwater Triassic localities in Arizona, and we can see kind of the differences between some of the chondrichthyans there to the ones in the Paleozoic, albeit most of the Paleozoic stuff in Arizona would be marine. So there would be some differences with that. Yeah, so to wrap up this episode, I like to ask all of my guests If you were to discover one thing in your lifetime, what would it be? And we'll start with Grant and then go to Tom.
Okay, so I was thinking about this the other day. So there are two things that I would kind of want to do. So, Ben, you'll know that I'm not just a fish person. Like I work on a bunch of other things, and oriodonts and other mammals are uh, kind of kind of more my bread and butter, I would say. One of the things that Gavin and I had always been talking about and hoping we would find one day in Arizona would be a calicothere. Calicotheres, for people that don't know, are these perissodactyls. So they're related to like rhinos and tapirs and horses. So they look like what do people call like a gorilla horse, right? So it's an animal that has a head that's very horse-like, but it has very long forelimbs that are generally speaking larger than their or longer than their hind limbs. So they look kind of like when a gorilla is stomping around on knuckle walking, and they have claws, and they were probably pulling down branches to eat. We've never found something like that in Arizona. But then again, aside from like ice age stuff, Cenozoic material is fairly rare. Um, so we have there's a couple of Miocene age sites and some Miopliocene sites and things like that. Uh, but really what we find are camels and oriodonts and things like that. But what we really want to find is a calicothere. The other thing I would say that I want to find would be Silurian strata in Arizona, and then find Silurian
Oh,
fish, right?
that's
Like
one of my goals too.
yeah. So I think we can kind of like overlap there is because for the longest time I've always been told there's no Silurian in Arizona, and I don't know that I buy that.
I
Like
bet you there is.
there has to be. Like I feel like just like with the Ordovician, there has to be more Ordovician
Yeah,
than that,
yeah,
or
yeah,
like or for the Eocene, for that
yeah,
matter. Like
yeah.
because I'm always keeping my eye open for Eocene stuff. I bet you there is some place in Arizona that we could go that if we were really digging around, really looking, we would find Silurian strata and then Silurian fish.
Well, you and I are alike then. Silurian strata. I've
Yeah.
been always wanting to find a Eurypterid
Oh, that would be so cool.
Hmm.
in Arizona. Now, uh, there is one strata layer that has, now I can't figure out if it's in between Devonian and Cambrian, but there is one thin strata layer that's yellow sandstone that has arthropod burrows in it like crazy.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'll have to show you that later. But that's one of my goals. Another one is to find a megalodon tooth in Arizona
Okay.
and to find the freshwater sharks from the Permian or from the Pennsylvanian Permian boundary.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think like you're talking about finding Eurypterids and things like that in Arizona. That would be super cool. And one place I think that we could look for that would actually be in the Carboniferous, because there is
Yeah,
one
yeah,
Eurypterid group that makes it into the Carboniferous,
yep.
and that would be so cool to find those guys too.
Okay, I'll find one.
Yeah, there
I
you go.
wonder about what about the marten though, because you have stuff in I think a Eurypterid in the go-go in
Right. So like you're
In a
thinking,
way,
yeah. So you're thinking we should find Eurypterids in the marten, and we just haven't. Now,
no, wrong
um,
environment. Wrong
right.
environment.
It's the wrong environment. That's the thing.
Yeah, they're
So
very
like,
sensitive to their salinity.
yeah. So like we'd have to be looking. I mean, it's not to say that we couldn't find one in the marten. We would just have to find the right depositional environment in the marten.
Yes,
hmm.
yes,
And
and that
so
and that would be a sandy environment.
yeah. Now, here's the thing for me. Like I've seen Eurypterids in the field, not here, but like in Nebraska.
Right.
So on the Platte River, if you go to southern Nebraska on the Platte, there are sections where like you're right on the river, you're walking along the river, and you look on the outcrop, and there are Eurypterids like crazy.
Wow.
So what I would think is, finding if we could find an outcrop like that,
Okay, I'll do it.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm gonna go
Wow.
one past you with the Sonoran fish, and I'm gonna go Ordovician fish Lagerstadt.
Yeah, that would be
Find the
so
Then
Ord.
cool.
you would be breaking the world record for Dr. Elliott, Dave Elliott,
Yeah, that
Lower
would be pretty cool.
Ordovician.
It was great having you guys on. I appreciate it. And for those that have watched the entire thing, I know that you're shark and I guess now placoderm nerds. So don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and you can stay updated for more Chondrichthyan content with maybe a little placoderm stuff sprinkled in too.